have dialed is not in service at this
Oh
time.
man. Hello and welcome to day 11 of Ease. Today we are going to talk about the dark side of change and how to cope with it in a positive and productive way so that no matter what is going on in our lives, we are normalizing the good and we are refusing to normalize the bad. What I see often in myself, in my family, and my friends is that when bad behavior happens, we tend to rationalize or normalize things. We don't want to face the ugly truths because they are ugly and they are painful, and dealing with it can sometimes feel overwhelming. We've made it through the first 10 days of Ease, and this has been a really intense journey. And if you've been feeling overwhelmed, don't be hard on yourself. It's normal and it's okay. And the most important thing to acknowledge and dive into is what has felt hard about it. And when you're thinking of these things or when these emotions are coming up, for me specifically, it's around my goals right now and what I see for my future. And the reason why I personally am having such a hard time with it is because we've just seen that nothing is guaranteed, and it's really hard to plan when everything was going along with your life plan and then something comes and rips a tornado through it, and then you're just standing there in the middle of your masterpiece that is your life, and you're like, wow, I just experienced the biggest disaster. It wasn't my fault. I couldn't have stopped it, but now I have to cope and adapt, even though I really prepared in every way so that this would not happen. So that being said, I want to talk to you first about common feelings when things are disastrous, whether it's COVID-19 or a bad breakup, whatever it may be. You are acclimating to a new normal. So things that are very common to feel, as stated by Psychology Today, are having mood swings, being irritable or overly emotional, having strong anxiety, and a lot of guilt. So a lot of people will also have a tough time concentrating, eating, sleeping, and also will have flashbacks that are triggered by images or sounds that bring back memories. So this is a lot of PTSD. So if you have PTSD around being isolated, being quarantined in your home might trigger that. And that's very important to acknowledge and recognize. People also have a lot of physical symptoms in response to stress or trauma. And this can include having a rapid heartbeat, so really just feeling things getting intense, having headaches, stomach aches, and for me, although I don't know if this is from stress or from having COVID itself, I have a lot of physical aches and pains. Now that you know the common symptoms or feelings of dealing with a very stressful, catastrophic event, let's talk about the reality of how to cope. Clearly, you are here and you are committed to your personal growth, and you are somewhere on the journey of self-mastery. That is so amazing, and honestly, I want you to just take a minute and put one hand on your heart and your other hand right on top of your belly button and breathe. And just say thank you to yourself. And even if it feels cheesy, even if you're on a train, even if you are in a room with family who's going to think you're crazy, just do it, because showing up for yourself unapologetically opens the doors for other people to show up unapologetically themselves in a positive way. So right now, a lot of us, myself included, are feeling deeply lonely. We are really feeling like our day-to-day life has been disrupted. And when that happens, it can trigger different things. So if you already have a lot of stress and anxiety, if you already have a lot of depression in your life, then this is going to be affecting you even more. And you need to acknowledge that those things maybe are not stacked in your favor, and now is the time to double down on the self-growth. So the first thing you really need to know about committing to self-growth and just emerging from this traumatic event in a positive state is that in the process of dealing with it, you're not going to feel immediately better right away. And in those low moments, you need to find a way to stay focused on the future and the beautiful growth that you'll have, the amazing relationships you'll have, the great person you will be, and how you will positively affect people just by existing. Because in those low moments, and we all have them, it's very hard to pull yourself out of them and remind yourself of the bright future you have when everything seems unpredictable and nothing seems stable or reliable. So the way that I recommend you do this is to think about the best version of yourself that you can be, not today, but when you are 70, 80, 90 years old, decades ahead of where you are now. And I want you to think about that person, and if that person handled today very well, how would that change your most important relationships? How would that affect your best friend or your romantic partner or your children, whatever you have that's close to you, your business, or even your career if you're not a business owner yourself? How would you change other people's lives in positive ways? And if you're feeling stuck and you're like, I don't know how I would change someone's life, think about when the people around you are happy, when they are succeeding, when they are encouraging you, and when they are lighting you up from within because they feel lit up from within. How does that make you feel? And as you take a moment to tune into that and really focus on how other people make you feel, it helps you understand that when you show up with that vibrant, positive energy, you're making others feel great as well. So get as specific as you can. Do this with 1 to 2 people in your life who are very important to you. And when you have those low moments, bring out that paper or that note, wherever you are writing this down. And I highly encourage you to write this down and take a look at how your positive decisions positively impact the people who are most important to you. And that will help you get out of your slump a little bit more, because having the motivation to do something for ourselves is very important, but inspiration, which we talked about yesterday, is far, far, far more important. And we have to get inspired to be our best selves so that we can really, really make our community and our home a much better place. So our actions have a ripple effect, and it's really important to recognize that. The second thing that you should be aware of is that during times of serious trauma and catastrophe, it's actually more important to focus on survival. So whether that is finding a new job or any job that will pay you so that you can pay your bills on time, or if it is just getting up in the morning and taking care of yourself and your kids and showing up for work and just showing up for the essentials, then let it be that. And during times where you feel like things are just too much, allow yourself to have those moments. The best way to understand what is essential and what is not essential is to really write down what you have to do in health, wealth, love, and happiness so that you can survive. And this is the bare minimum. It's there for you to know what your limits are. And if you are having a tough mental health day, if you are really just not feeling great, then you know what? I need to show up for work for at least 3 hours. Just knowing your bare minimums does a lot to keep you grounded and keep you sane, because a lot of people are very hyper right now, where they're wanting to push, but you don't want to push so much that you break. You want to push so much that you bend and grow, but not at the expense of your own survival. You don't want to have to go to the hospital because you've pushed yourself too hard. That's not the point. The point is just to use these tools when they positively serve you, so that you can continue to grow and expand at your own pace, on your own time, and not get too wrapped up in the art of achieving, because achieving is beautiful and it's nice, but if you're achieving but you're not having the baseline levels that you need in the 4 pillars of health, wealth, love, and happiness, then you're going to grow a life with a very unstable foundation. So make sure that you write down what is essential for you to do every month or every week or every day, and write it down so that it makes sense for you. No one else has to see it. No one else has to understand it. The third thing you need to do that will help with stress and the trauma that you experience is to talk about what happened and what is happening. And the reason why this is so important is because if you don't release it verbally, the emotions will manifest as physical stress, and eventually these emotions will come out. It always shows up differently for every single person. For one person, it might turn into a migraine. For another person, it might be drowning yourself in alcohol or whatever your drug of choice is. And it's important to not only talk about it, but talk about it in the right settings. So what I mean is, do not necessarily go to a friend and call them and emotionally dump for hours on end about how difficult your life is. What you should do instead is start by journaling, and also talk to a professional who is experienced with dealing with trauma and self-mastery. So you can either do this with a coach or a therapist, or even do it with a wellness practitioner, someone who feels that it is their job and they are receiving something through it. There are so many free options that you can use. Like, I know that there are a few help hotlines where you can actually talk to a doctor, or you can talk to someone who is on the other line who is showing up to help people handle their trauma and process it. So go to those places first, and it's not because you don't want to be open and share with your friends, but it's because you want to release all of that toxic baggage, so that when you show up for your friends and acquaintances, you can show up with positive energy. Because at the end of the day, we are all going through the same thing. And if you are sharing with your friends in a way that is actually just an emotional word vomit, sometimes it can leave them feeling like they were feeling okay, and then after talking to you, they're not feeling okay. And then you may cause a rift in your relationship unintentionally. So we all have this happen to us at one point or another. We all are that person at one point or another. Figure out a healthy way that you can talk about what you're going through, and just start releasing. The more you discuss, the more you talk, the better you will feel, because it will not be sitting inside of you, making your skin feel like it's on fire. So that's number 3. Talk about what's going on. Okay, so number 4. Number 4 is acknowledging that we all collectively are going through extreme grief. And right now, it is a great time to show up for your friends. So if you know that a friend of yours has lost someone, or has had financial trouble, or is really just struggling emotionally and feels lonely, then think about something you could do that would positively serve them in some way. And it doesn't mean that you have to dive into the negative feelings and hash it out. The good thing that you can do is just sending someone flowers or giving them a nice present, or even just doing something small to let them know they are in your thoughts and you care, and your intentions are to see them healthy and happy, and for this to be known. So it doesn't have to be anything complicated, but just showing up and supporting your friends is so important right now. And the way that I personally have been showing up for most people is just by smiling and having the thought in my mind, I believe in you. And when you show up with that kind of energy, it really changes your interaction and it has a beautiful ripple effect. So don't think that any gesture is too small. Even just sending a good thought their way is a great place to start. So remember, you are not alone. You have friends, and when you do something to make someone else feel good and it's genuine, it actually makes you feel good, and studies prove it. So now we're on to the last element of how to deal and cope with the extreme stress of a traumatic event. Needless to say, set aside time to grieve and get in touch with your inner world. And what I mean by this is, no matter who you are or what you're doing, your life has changed, which means that there are some elements of your previous life that you loved and cherished, and now they might be gone. So you need to take some time to properly grieve the death of those things. And when you are grieving the death of these beautiful things that were in your life that are no more, you actually are allowing yourself to process the sadness and the destabilizing energy that's all around you. So good ways to do this are to write a letter and then burn it in a safe way where it's not going to catch anything else on fire. Another way is to light a candle and just have a moment of meditation and sit with that candle and maybe just cry. Another way to do it is just to hug yourself and to show up for yourself and allow your sadness to release. And you can do this by saying to yourself, when you're like, I want to keep it in, I don't want to cry, I don't want to let it out, you can just give yourself a nice hug, just like this, and just allow yourself to really feel your feelings. Grief is real and it is so necessary. When you don't grieve properly or fully, and you have what's called incomplete grief, things that you might experience are irritability and anger that really shows itself as anger management problems. So you can't regulate your anger or the upset that you feel. Other things that you might feel are having obsessive thoughts or having obsessive behaviors where you just can't seem to move forward. You're maybe reliving these situations years after they happen because your mind is stuck there and you just feel stuck in this place of regret and sadness. And it's normal to feel that for a few weeks, maybe even a few months, but any longer, you do need to acknowledge that this is incomplete grief, and you might want to work with someone to help you grieve, not because you're not capable of doing it on your own, but because sometimes we just need help getting out of our own way, and the more we accept help, the more we can be helpful to others. Another thing you might feel is just having a hyper alertness of fear and loss. So you might always be acknowledging or recognizing, what am I going to lose in this situation if I say yes? So for some people, it might show up as a lack of commitment, where they never really want to fully commit to anything because they're afraid that if they commit, they'll have a massive loss and it will bring up all that old pain. And we see it all the time, but you don't want that to be even more prevalent in your relationships and in society in general because of this pandemic. Okay, something else that you might feel is really having the tendency to overreact. And this, as Psychology Today states, can manifest in the way of pulling away from things. So someone showing up and really being a love bomber and then running away. So they want the connection, they want the relationship, but then they run away as soon as it gets real. And it's because they're overreacting. They're swinging from one point to another, one extreme to the other extreme, because they are just overly sensitive. And that's intense. It's intense for them, and it's intense for the people around them. Other things that happen are addiction and self-harming. So this doesn't have to be physical harming in a typical sense, but it could be an obsessive need to eat healthy foods and overly limiting, overly restricting to the point where it becomes an eating disorder, or having something where you are working too much. You become addicted to work because you feel like there's no stable financial future that you can count on. So these are examples of addictions and self-harming behaviors that look positive, but ultimately they're not. Okay, so the last one is apathy, numbness, and low-grade depression. So we talked about this earlier, but people might have a little bit more what's the purpose type of energy, like why am I even doing this? And that will hinder your momentum, it will hinder your drive, and that's where the inspiration piece comes in from yesterday. Staying inspired helps you move out of this numb space because you are able to see that life has always ebbed and flowed. And if you are in this space of being apathetic, numb, and just not having positive emotions, then I really encourage you to look at what has happened throughout history. Look at what has happened after wars, after depressions, after pandemics, and seeing the positive stories that come out of those challenges might help you right now. They've really been helping me, and it's honestly one of the only things that's getting me through this tough time. So now that you know why grieving is so important for your long-term emotional, mental, and physical health, let's talk about the right way to grieve. First of all, there is no right way to grieve, and everyone has their own journey. So instead of looking at things online about the 5 stages of grief and really feeling like you have to feel all of those things and you must match that and telling yourself you're in denial, don't do that. Just acknowledge that you have your own process, and there are things that have been proven to help